executive board approval has now been obtained for the IMF agreement. And the first tranche of approximately $330 million was received last week. Now, the total sum that is required for the conduct of the local government elections in this country, which are now overdue, is approximately 7 billion Sri Lanka rupees. This is a very minuscule portion of the first tranche that has been received from the IMF. In fact, the entire sum that is required for the conduct of the local government election is less than 1% of the money that has been received from the IMF. Less than 1%. Indeed, it is half of 1%. Consequently, the government is in no position any longer with any degree of credibility to maintain that the lack of resources is preventing this election from being held. The problem has nothing to do with the lack of money. It has to do with the lack of popular support, the lack of votes. I do not think that any reasonable citizen of this country will contest the proposition that it is justifiable, it is indeed essential to use this minuscule part of the money that has been received to protect democracy in this country. Surely that is a prime requisite, which the international community, the IMF, we all recognize. Now, the government itself recognizes that the present situation is profoundly unsatisfactory, because today there is not one single elected member in any of the 339 local government institutions which stand dissolved by operation of law on the 19th of March. Not one elected member. The entirety of those functions and responsibilities now devolves upon officials who act under the supervision of the governor. That is not democracy at all. So government recognizes this. That is why the government has appointed a committee under the leadership of the Honorable Vajira Abhivardhana. The purpose of this committee is to examine ways and means of ensuring that the services provided for our people continue with the same degree of efficiency and sensitivity as earlier. But how can such a committee be useful at all? The need of the hour is to ensure that the people of our country, at the base of the pyramid, with regard to the satisfaction of their day-to-day requirements, they have the opportunity to access elected representatives and to get their everyday problems sorted out by people whom they themselves, by the exercise of their free vote, have sent to these local bodies. Now, no committee can solve this problem because there is no known mechanism, according to the law of this country, which would permit the previous local authorities to have their terms extended. That is just not possible. No amount of legal ingenuity is going to enable that to be done. It is equally clear that chairmen and deputy chairmen of these bodies cannot now be appointed commissioners with a view to ensuring the continuity of their tenure of office. That too is completely ruled out. It cannot be done. Then what is the solution that remains? There is no other option. If the government is sincerely committed to the objective of giving the people of our country the right to have their problems at the local government level resolved by their own elected representatives, then this election must be held without delay. Several dates have been suggested in the past. First it was the 9th of March, then it was the 25th of April. Now, without any further prevarication, without any further hollow, insincere excuses being trotted out, this election must be held. A few days ago, there was an important step that was taken by the General Secretary of the Samagi Jana Balavege, the Honorable Ranjit Madhum Bandara. The Honorable General Secretary of the SJB addressed a letter to the Speaker. The gist of that letter has to do with parliamentary privilege. Parliament, through the Annual Appropriation Act, the budget that was passed in December last year, allocated to the Elections Commission the sum of approximately 10 billion rupees for the specific purpose of conducting the local government election. Then the Secretary of the Ministry of Finance has not made those resources available to the Elections Commission in accordance with the explicitly declared will of Parliament. Parliament said, do this. Parliament had every right to say that in terms of Article 148 of the Constitution, because the control of public finance is the responsibility of Parliament. There is no other institution in this country which has that power or responsibility. So in the exercise of that power, Parliament directed that 10 billion rupees should be given to the Elections Commission for this purpose. Up to now, the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance has been in breach of his mandatory duty to act according to the will of Parliament. He has not done so. Now, if that is not a breach of the privileges of members of Parliament, I would like to ask, what is a breach? What would constitute a breach? Can there be a clearer case of open defiance of Parliament, of contumacious rejection of a direction by Parliament in accordance with the Constitution, in the exercise of powers expressly conferred upon Parliament by no less than the Constitution itself? If the Secretary of the Ministry of Finance adopts the attitude, I don't care what Parliament says, that's of no consequence to me, I'm not giving effect to that, then does that not constitute a breach of privilege of Parliament? Can there be a more cast iron, a more explicit example of a cynical contravention of the privileges of Parliament? So this is the pith and substance of the complaint which has been made in writing by the Honorable Ranjit Madhum Bandara to Speaker Mahinda Yapa Abhayavardhana. And it is our firm conviction that the Speaker should take immediate action on this matter, refer this complaint to the Ethics and Privileges Committee, and we expect rapid and resolute action to be taken on the basis of the complaint which has been made to the Speaker by the General Secretary of the Samagi Janabala Vega. At the same time, we are very strongly opposed to judges of the Supreme Court being brought before a committee of Parliament. And we make no bones about it. We tell the country very clearly that we will strain every sinew, we will do everything in our power to protect the prestige and stature of the judiciary of our country. This has nothing to do with individuals. It has to do with the sanctity of an institution that lies at the very core of the constitutional framework of this country. It is the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court alone that is the final bulwark for the protection of fundamental rights that are enjoyed by all of us, you, me, and the people of our country. What is the conceivable basis for humiliating denigrating judges of the Supreme Court in this way? What have they done which can by any stretch of the imagination be construed as a derogation of the privileges of Parliament? All that they have done is to strengthen Parliament, where Parliament has given a direction that a specific sum of money should be used for a specific purpose, and if there is a contumacious refusal by the executive to give effect to that direction by Parliament, then the court has said that must not happen. The executive must do what Parliament has directed well within the four corners of the Constitution and the powers that are vested in the legislature. That is fortifying, reinforcing the powers of Parliament. Now, we will not allow judges to be brought down in the esteem of the people of our country by being hauled up before Parliament, being told you can hear this case, you can't hear the other case. We are going to question you about the manner in which you perform your judicial functions. That is certainly not the business of Parliament. If anybody is transgressing the limits laid down in very clear terms by the Constitution, it is not the judiciary, it is Parliament. He says so without fear of contradiction. Already the Bar Association has taken a very firm stand in defense of the judiciary and indeed in the defense of the core basic rights of our people. Now, this has happened not only the main Bar Association in Colombo, but some of the provincial bars, like the Gaul Bar Association, has issued a very emphatic statement. So, we are now making the categorical statement that if any attempt is made to bring Supreme Court judges before Parliament, we will resist that by all means at our disposal. We will not allow that to happen. We will agitate all over the country and we will inform the public mind about the horrendous repercussions that will accompany such a course of action, which indeed will be the prelude to the emergence of a totalitarian state. Now, there are also significant issues relating to the implementation of the agreement with the International Monetary Fund. We have been told that Parliament must indicate before the end of April whether Parliament endorses or rejects the agreement which has received the imprimatur of the Executive Board of the IMF. There's no legal requirement that that should be done. But we have been told that it will not be possible for the government to proceed to the second stage of discussions with creditors unless this endorsement by Parliament is available. We do not think that this is an honest endeavor. If there was sincerity about obtaining the cooperation of the opposition, then this should have happened not at this moment, but 6 months earlier, in September of last year, when the staff level agreement was concluded with the IMF. We are now told the cooperation of the opposition is essential. We were always willing to extend that cooperation. There was nothing niggardly or vacillating about our approach. We said we are prepared to cooperate. How can we cooperate without knowing what the substance of the agreement is? We must be in the know. How can you keep us in the dark and ask for our cooperation? Isn't there an obvious contradiction there? So not on one isolated occasion, but repeatedly, Parliament asked the government to reveal the contents of the staff level agreement. The government persistently refused to do so and took up the position that the document can be made public only after final agreement is reached with the executive board of the IMF. But when it is a done deal, when it is all done and dusted, what is the use of asking the opposition? How can the opposition's reactions or views make one jot or tittle of difference? It can't make any difference at all. There's no flexibility, there's no scope for development or modification. It's all finished. So we do not regard this as a candid approach by the government. But even at this late stage, I think it is right and proper that we should define our approach to some of the basic issues that are dealt with in this agreement. And we have no compunction. We are not reluctant to state that there are some features of it to which we are implacably opposed. We will not accept those, because in our view, those are gravely detrimental to the interests of our country. To start with, the situation with regard to state-owned business enterprises. There is some meaning that we must attach to agreements that we have reached with the people of our country, let alone anybody else. Those are the most sacred of agreements in a democratic polity. What is the compact, the social compact? What is the social compact that we have arrived at with the people of our country? At the parliamentary elections in August 2020, we went all over the country. From every platform, we told the people of Sri Lanka that these are valued assets of our country which we will protect and defend and develop and strengthen. That is what we will do. We ask you for a mandate for that. It was very explicitly articulated. Now, some of the enterprises that are sought to be sold, like the telecom and the insurance corporation, are hugely profit-making institutions. They bring in large volumes of money into a depleted treasury. What did we not say at that time about the insurance corporation, for example? We said this was the singular achievement of the late Prime Minister Siribao Bandaranaike. The late Minister T.B. Langaratne played a yeoman, a pioneering role. We are resolutely committed to the defense of these institutions, which we will preserve in the interest of posterity, generations yet to be born. Now we have turned all of that on its head, literally turned it on its head. Far from protecting and developing these institutions, we are now saying that we are going to sell off these institutions. In that case, we must go before the people again and obtain a fresh mandate. Anybody is entitled to change their minds. But the least that can be done is we must go before the people and say we have changed our whole approach, our ideology, our convictions. We no longer believe a word of what we told you in 2020. We have reversed it all dramatically. Now give us a mandate for a new approach, which is 180 degrees at odds with what we told you earlier. Without doing that, on the current mandate, which is the mandate on the basis of which 143 members of parliament were returned by the electorate in this country, Parliament does not have even the vestige of a moral or ethical right to endorse a proposal for the sale of these profit-making institutions. That is our very clear and unequivocal stand. We are equally resolutely opposed to proposals regarding the restructuring of the domestic denominated debt, because we think that that will carry horrendous consequences for the people of our country. If that is done, the first casualty will be none other than the Employees' Provident Fund. The Employees Provident Fund contains money belonging to workers in this country. They are hard-earned money. They have toiled the whole of their working lives. And the EPF contains the resources which they hope to live on in the evening of their lives, for their medical expenses, for their day-to-day expenses. If this is done, then we are shaving off approximately 1/3 of the money that is lying to the credit of workers, trade unions and others in the Employees Provident Fund. We are reducing largely the value of that money because of this shaving off process. We will not agree to that because that is singularly and patently unjust. Such an initiative will also place in jeopardy the state banks of Sri Lanka, which are already teetering under the pressure of very serious problems. The Bank of Ceylon, in particular the People's Bank, they will now be exposed to further jeopardy. We cannot run this risk. People of our country have accounts in those banks, and that is an approach that is fundamentally unacceptable. It is not only the state banks, and this will also ramify into the private banks in this country. The central bank itself becomes vulnerable. Treasury bills, for instance. So there is a whole gamut of consequences that will inevitably arise from any attempt that is made to restructure the local debt. And we require a firm, definite assurance that this will not be done. If there is any gray area, if there is any doubt about this, we wish to say categorically that we are definitely opposed to such a move. Then also, we firmly believe that before any of this is embarked upon, there is a preliminary step to be taken on the very threshold itself. And that is the establishment of a firm social security net. There is no doubt that when the process of implementation begins, there will be considerable, greater hardship than has been experienced so far, imposed on the less affluent sections of the Sri Lankan community. Now, they need to be protected. They are exceedingly vulnerable. This can be done only by means of a proper social safety net. So far, there has been a great deal of talk about it, but a definite plan has neither been formulated and certainly not implemented. So we think that that is the point of departure. Before any of this is sought to be implemented, let us start there. Let us protect the people who are in dire need of protection. Without doing that, if that is somewhere further down the road, and if the idea is to begin implementation with the vague promise that at some point of time an adequate social security net will be established, that is an approach which we find unconvincing and unacceptable.